Hello ladies, gentlemen, children, other aliens. Right, I'm back after a short hiatus. Now as I record this, it's just after Christmas, just before New Year, so I wish you a belated Merry Holiday, Merry Christmas and a premature Happy New Year. Certainly can't be any worse than last year, so fingers crossed on that one. Okay, today we're going to be having a look at some more science fiction books. A few months ago I did a series on vintage science fiction paperbacks, and it covered the novels of various writers. Today we're going to have a look at the short story collections of those same writers. Now people sometimes get mixed up between short story collections and anthologies. But basically, the way publishing worked back in the day, sort of 50, 60 years ago, was that writers would, or their agents would, send in stories to the various science fiction magazines, of which these were the two most popular, fantasy and science fiction and analogue. Now, when published, those stories would build up over time and be collected. If the author was a top author and the stories were good, they would be collected into a hardback. An editor would get the stories he liked and put them in a hardback edition. That would be then published, and if that did all right, then the hardback collection would go on to mass paperback. And that's the sort of stuff I'm going to be showing you today. Now, I'll start off with a quick disclaimer. Collections weren't as proliferate, I don't know what the word is anyway. There weren't as many of them as there were anthologies and novels, which is reflected in the numbers that I'm going to show you. But there was one author of fantasy and science fiction, Harlan Ellison, who had as many short story collections published as the one as I'm going to show you today. But I've left those out simply because I've already done a video, a tribute to Harlan Ellison a couple of years ago when the great man died. So I mean that's on the channel if you want to go and have a look at it. Right. So now we've got all that out the way. I'll just get my voice in a bit better shape, hopefully. I've had a cold, so I'm not croaking as well as usual, but here we go. Right. I mean, as I said to you last time, a lot of these paperbacks are sort of 50, 60 years old, even more, some of them. Now this was a collection by probably one of the best British science fiction authors, or he was regarded as so anyway. Brian Aldiss, The Saliva Tree. This is a British Sphere edition. But by and large, the stories that were collected in these editions weren't necessarily their best stories or their most famous stories, but some editions are more interesting than others, and that was one of the more interesting ones. Now, the reason I've kept these is you'll notice the publisher there, Door SF. Now, this was a very, very strange publisher from back in the day. I mean, they did hundreds and hundreds of paperbacks over many, many years. and they were numbered, so I, obviously being a collector, I used to collect all of them. I don't have them all now because I had a big purge back in the day, and just kept the ones that I considered fit for the collection. But it was a strange publishing, as much as they did some very, very good books that won awards, but also they did an awful lot of pot boilers, which to my taste were pretty horrible, to be quite honest. But they sold, and I wish I'd kept them now, because I was having a look at the price of some of them the other day, and to put together a collection of these, I'd need a mortgage my house, quite frankly. But anyway, that was one of the better ones they did, the Book of Brian Orders. They did quite a few of these collections, the Book of so and so, such and so forth. But that was, it wasn't some of the best of Brian Orders' short stories, but I just kept that one because I just happen to like door books. Right now, Paul Anderson, he was quite a book of Paul Anderson, another one in the series. That was that number 153. That was a few years after the Orders one. He was a well-respected science fiction author in America. I don't think many people this side of the pond were as taken with him, but he certainly his novels were probably a bit more interesting than his short stories. But I decided to keep that one because it's one of the few Paul Anderson short story collections that I've seen, and it's another door book. And I'd love to put a collection of those together, as I say. Okay, now here's a guy I like, Joji Ballard. And that's the only short story collection of his I have, strangely, although he did quite a few. Low-flying aircraft. That's that one. Let's have a look at the indicia page. That one was published in 1976. Yeah, so that's a slightly later one, as you can tell by the nice condition. Okay, now Bradbury did a lot of short story collections, of course. And almost all of his short stories are collected. There weren't many short stories of his that editors passed up on. Now, the Martian Chronicles, that's actually marketed as a novel, but it isn't. It's what they call a fix-up, and it's where a lot of short stories are edited into a novel format, if you like. It reads consecutively. I like this book. It's one of my favourite Bradbury books, and of course it's pure science fiction. And they did a TV series back in the 70s, I think it was, which I quite liked, but got very sort of lukewarm reviews. But yeah, that's one of the better Ray Bradburys. Now here's a guy you might not even have heard of, Frederick Brown. He was another science fiction author that was well thought of in the States, but never really caught on here. And the reason I've kept this is because he's a good writer. I mean, he does good short stories, and also this as you can see there, Del Rey publishers. They did high quality publication, so that's the reason I kept that one. And it's in lovely condition, so I haven't actually read it, but I'll get round to it one day perhaps. Now here's an author whose novels I find very impenetrable, and his short stories not so much. That's Samuel Delany. This is some of his more, shall we say, more accessible short stories. It's got Driftglass, Time considers the helix of semi-precious stones, which I believe won the Nebula and the Hugo Awards for that particular year for the short story. As I say, it's one I kept because certainly it's readable anyway. Let's put it that way. And he just did different by and large. And there's a guy you'll all know, another one of these Door specials. That was that early one, 44, book of Phillip Dick. Most of his short stories are fairly remarkable for something or other. This one doesn't contain any of his major classics, but like I say, it's a Door book, and I'm pleased that I kept it. This was another one of Dick's collections, The Golden Man. As I say, again, not amongst his best stuff, but I like the cover of that one. I think that's why I kept it. Also, I'm a Dick fan as well, so he's probably done a few more published, but either I didn't have them or I decided that they had to go. Now, he's a guy who polarises opinion, Thomas Dish. I've read a couple of his novels and I didn't find them sort of too bad, but I know a lot of people are not keen on them, but he was one of the British kind of new wave, when this new wave led by Michael Moorcock and New Worlds magazine came onto the scene. I'm not familiar with a lot of stories in that collection, but I kept it because it looked interesting. And here another one. With a title like that, I assumed it was some of his Fundamental Dish. I assumed it was one of his better stories. So let's see if I recognise anything in there. No, not really, but I guess I'm not an aficionado of Dish short stories, quite frankly. Okay, now we get to a guy who everybody knows and loves, Philip Farmer. What can I say about this fella? As I say, it's another Door, one of the earlier ones. I've read quite a bit of his stuff, novels and short stories, and there's always something weird about Philip Farmer's story. I can't think of any other word to describe it, really. If any of you have read his Riders of the Purple Wage, please write in and let me know what that's all about, will you? But that's another one of those Door goodies. I don't know why I kept this one. It just looked a bit odd. It's the Jim Bain Presents Jim. They did a few books back in the day, not many, I don't think. And it just struck me as something that should be kept. Sometimes you just get a feeling that you really should hang on to this. It hasn't got an indicia, so I assume it's a book of short stories. Otherwise, I wouldn't have kept it. Okay. Riverworld and Other Stories. That's one of his more famous series, Riverworld. I couldn't really get into it personally, but I thought I'd better keep that one because it's bound to be good. I'll get round to reading it one day. Down in the Black Gang. That was one of his more better thought of short story collections, as I remember. I'll be getting on for about 60 years old, that one. Right, now we come to somebody who you all know, Robert Heinlein. I can't really tell you much about Robert Heinlein because apart from a few of his famous short stories like By His Bootstraps and a couple of others, I can't say I've read much Heinlein. He's just one of these authors that, he's sort of top drawer, very, very famous. I've no doubt he's a top drawer writer, but he's one of those authors that never really appealed to me as a novelist. That's a very, very magnificently huge volume of, if I take it, some of his more famous short stories. Well, The Roads Must Roll, yeah, I've read that one. Lifeline, Man Who Sold the Moon, yeah. Green Hills of Earth, Coventry, Methuselah's Children. Yeah, I mean, this is probably his most, if not all of his better short stories, and it's a large volume, so I thought it well worth keeping. Right, this fella, have you heard of him? R.A. Levity? No, I don't suppose you have. It's another one of those Door short story collections that I love. Yeah, he's a very strange author. He's kind of a bit off the wall. So like cross between Robert Sheckley and David Bunch, who you might not have heard of, but that's the only way I could describe him. He is, shall we say, unique, and I don't suppose many of you are familiar with that book or in fact the author, but I like him, so decided to keep it. Right, Fritz Leiber, best of. Another one of those. That's a Ballantine. Yeah, I normally keep Ballantine or Del Rey short story collections because they normally pick some good stuff. I heard a story about Fritz Leiber. Of course, he's the author of the Fafhrd and Grey Mouse sword and sorcery stories, which became very popular at one time, and also a very, very good author of science fiction as well, his novels and his short stories. But Harlan Ellison, I mentioned earlier, told a story, a sad story really, of people thinking that science fiction authors lived high on the hog, had plenty of money and sort of like lived a high life from their royalties. But in fact, he's told a story of this guy, Fritz Leiber, sitting in a small sort of like one-bed apartment with his typewriter on a couple of planks for support, living in near poverty. So yeah, you can be the best of the best of science fiction writers, but didn't mean to say you were rich. So that was that one. Okay, this is another one of those Ballantine collections. Larry Niven. He was kind of hard nuts and bolts author who used to sell stories to that magazine Analog. Not really my cup of tea, but I decided to keep that one because it's a Ballantine, and that's probably some of his better stories, I would hope. Okay, Frederick Police. He's another Ballantine. He's another author who was better known in America than he was in this country, in the UK. When he wrote a lot of famous novels. Maybe not so much short stories, but so again I kept that one because I assume it's amongst his better work. Right, he's a fellow that I used to like, Robert Sheckley. He's not exactly a comedy science fiction writer, but there's a lot of comedy aspects to his writing. I always enjoyed the short stories that I read of his. And yeah, I like the cover of that one as well. So I thought we'd keep a Robert Sheckley or two, and likewise with that one. So I was saying about the title that I liked on that one, and I thought, yeah, okay, that's obviously a British publication. I mean, I prefer, for the collection, I prefer American imprints, but yeah, I'm not averse to, especially if it's in as nice condition as that is for a 50, 60-year-old book. Okay. He's a man. Robert Silverberg, very respected and well-known American author of short stories and novels. This one's peculiar as much as it's a collection of 3 novellas. Now, novella is just too big for a short story and too small for a novel, which might seem obvious, but I thought I'd mention it anyway. Born with the Dead, yeah, that's quite heart-rending, if you like. I've read that. It pulls on the heartstrings a little bit, that one. That's why I kept it. Norman Spinrad, yeah. He was sort of, he was one of the, I mentioned the UK new wave of the 70s. He was more of the US new wave of the 70s. Wrote quite a few short stories, but I just love the title of that one. Last Hurrah of the Golden Horde. That's up there amongst my favourites. There again, I don't know if it contains his greatest work, but so I just like the title. Jack Vance. I suppose a lot of his stuff was fantasy rather than science fiction, although he did science fiction. I guess the title of that one would suggest that it's fantasy, but it says a science fiction adventure, and it's 8 short stories of his. Can't say I ever really got into him, but I thought that he was so well thought of that I better keep one of his books, and this is an example of a publisher. I mean, who are these? Collier Books, yeah. Look at that, after 50 or 60 years. You know, a lot of my other books are sort of like brown around the edges, but that is pure. That is literally in mint condition. You know, if I was to sell that on eBay, I'd probably get a fortune for that, but I'm not going to. Gene Wolfe, yeah, he's another very, very well thought of author. And this is a strange one because The Island of Dr. Death and Other Stories. No, that's a bit of a joke actually, because there were quite a lot of stories with a combination of island and Doctor and Death in them. There was the Death of Dr. Island and the Doctor of Death Island, or what have you. You know, it was. I think it was a running joke, but I decided to keep him because I've got a few of his novels upstairs, but I thought I'd better keep some of his short stories because he's so well liked. And finally, of the science fiction, we have John Varley. Now, he's another author you might not have come across. Another analogue, hard nuts and bolts author. I think I read one of his novels once. I can't remember what it was. It was a weird title, the Off-Fire Kai Hotline or something, I don't know. But I decided to keep that one because he's so well liked. Now, of course, there are. I'll show you one of Ray Bradbury's. Ray Bradbury had a lot of short story collections published. A lot of them were fantasy and horror. But you know, you've got ones like this, Don't Reign Forever, which is like a combination of science fiction and fantasy. And you've got Dandelion Wine, which again you've got It's mainly fantasy, but you've got a bit of science fiction thrown in there. Now, I mentioned earlier about fix-ups. I believe that was the Atrocity exhibition by Joji, Ballard. That's a book that kind of, again, polarised opinion back in the 70s when it was printed, I think. And I have a feeling that although that definitely says on the back that it's a novel, I have a feeling it was a fix-up again of short stories that appeared elsewhere. Now, a lot of these, according to the indicia, appeared in sort of like weird places. Magazine called Ambit, something called Encounter, the ICA event sheet, International Times, New Worlds, which of course was very famous, and the Transatlantic Review, all in the 60s. So it looks to me as if that's another fix-up, which is why I've shown it to you. Now, this is one of my favourite novels, and this was definitely a fix-up. This was published as short stories in various science fiction magazines. I showed this obviously when I showed the novels a few months ago, but I just love this book. It's basically about the future of mankind and how the robots and dogs take over the Earth, and how all the humans clear off to Jupiter, which you would think was uninhabitable, but it isn't apparently. It's a great book. Love it. It took me a while to find. Well, I got rid of my version, but I managed to find the exact version that I had, and I managed to find what I need, but not exactly in what you might call mint condition, but finding it at a decent price was very, very difficult. So yeah, there you have it, folks. There you have my smallish collection of vintage science fiction collections. Okay, well we've run nearly half an hour now, so we'll wrap it up. Next time we'll probably be doing the Christmas pickups, most likely. I've got a short unboxing of something I got for Christmas, which I'll do as a separate video. But anyway, until then, as I said, a happy new year, and thank you all for tuning in as usual. So goodbye for now. Bye bye.